Okay, it's the third time I've started this recording, and I think it is recording now. Good morning. It is 20, almost 20 to 12 on a Sunday, and I have several videos I'm going to try to bring together. Uh, Caught up on all of the discussion, commentary, which has always been fantastic. I don't always agree with your points. I have to tell you that. I think I'll probably send you that message, but that doesn't make you wrong and me right, he smiled. It just means that uh, your perspective is not necessarily the same as mine, and that's fine. But I am not the gospel uh, purveyor as such. At any rate, the discussion questions are fine, and the assignments have been the last assignment about a precursor to the major assignment, which is I'm going to do a separate video about in a few minutes about the policy that you're going to propose or explore for April 18th. I'm going to give you a head start on that, so nothing will be a surprise. That's the next one of the next videos up. I have 3 or 4 ready to go today. But I wanted to do it. This one was actually responding to what I think I saw in the responses that you gave me in terms of your responses to the discussion question about the chapter, in so far as the degree to which you expect to have uh, engagement and participation from your stakeholders. I was extremely encouraged by how you recognize the need to have stakeholder input. And I like the way several of you took the time or found research to support that point. I believe in previous weeks, maybe a couple of weeks ago, which for some reason I can't open today to double check about. I believe that in some previous videos, I talked about engagement slash involvement. And there is a difference in my view, and I'll come to that as it seems to be appropriate. And what I wanted to do is kind of do two things within this particular video. I wanted to reiterate Priscilla Wohlstetter's and her colleagues' model of high involvement. Now, she called it high involvement. I would change that word to high engagement. And in my mind, there's a degree of investment from stakeholders. You can be involved by watching a basketball game from the stands, uh, or you could be helping the coach figure out what the strategy should be. And you can see, obviously, there's two different sets of involvement. And so the second example I used in my mind is a matter of engagement. We actually part of the process to construct what it is you want to see happen. And I think policy formulation, per the text, but I don't think the text does enough of a job with that. I think that policy formulation is clearly a product from a good superintendent and her central office thinkers, and from the Board of Education, to take measures to recognize that several key factors are in place. I believe that I've spoken about them before, but it doesn't hurt to mention them again. That's why I'm going to reiterate them with a very fast PowerPoint, which I'll share with you on the screen. I won't put it in a separate module. It will be on the module that contains this particular presentation, in case you ask me where it is. So, so what I'm going to do is now review the Wohlstetter model. Then from the Wohlstetter model, I'm going to go back to that word you're probably getting sick of hearing from me. And I think you can guess it. If we were playing hangman, I would say it begins with an F and ends with a G, and nobody would be hung because you would all figure out pretty quickly it's that futuring premise, practice, mindset that I continuously emphasize out of my own research and my own books that I've written and have coming out, actually two more actually in the next 6 months. And so I'm going to talk about Wohlstetter, and then I'm going to show a cross-impact matrix approach, which is a futuring device. It's a kind of low-level futures forecasting device, but I think it would help you recognize how the smart decision makers and the smart superintendents are taking pains to recognize and anticipate, and here it comes again, future for uh, new all the things they need to factor for to assure that a policy gets constructed well and implemented, which many of you spoke about, the implementation premises, and spoke about the ability to communicate that word. I'll come back to that in another video in a moment. So I'm going to share the screen and co-construct a PowerPoint. It might only be 2 or 3 slides, but so that you have a visual to go with my jibber jabber, as well as have the closed caption approach in front of you if you find that helpful. So here I go. Okay. All right, so this is just the opening slide. And I just put down the week of today, March 10th through next Sunday. That doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot, but I did want to, of course, match it with your syllabus to some extent. And so I'm going to talk about 2 things. First, I'm going to talk about Wohlstetter. And so I'm putting a new slide in. I don't like that slide. I'm withdrawing that. All right, so I'm going to call this the high involvement model of effective input and collaboration. In fact, I might as well speak about that now because I just finished a chapter about this in this book I have coming out with some colleagues. And so I'm hot on the trail about this. For any number of collaboration is spelled wrong. Collaboration. There is a difference between collaboration versus cooperation. And again, as I said a moment ago, it's a matter of degree. In collaboration, people, stakeholders, pool their interests and their talents to co-construct meaning and to create something new altogether. Cooperation, certainly an important premise, but has a different level of investment. Cooperation is more about how individuals may contribute their skills in a more isolated way, not necessarily invested in or even to see the need for. Participating in a finished product of some sort, whatever that might mean. Reason why I'm saying that is now I think you're probably going to have that in front of you in lots of ways, of course, your professional careers, if you don't already have that. What you do is you stand outside yourself or stand outside a group, not necessarily physically, but psychically, and essentially observe how a group uh, invests and engages. And clearly, what you want as a district leader is to foster the right kind of engagement, the proper kind of engagement with the appropriate research-based factors. And that brings us back to Wohlstetter. Now, we say that Wohlstetter, and she wasn't the only person who authored this. There was quite a few other folks. They were out of nothing. Hear this for a moment. It'll make some sense. The Wohlstetter model came out of University of Southern California's educational research program that was called the School, hear this, for Governance. There's that word. There's what I call the G word, the School for Governance, which to me at least, and I've embraced this completely in my professional career from day one, and more so every day since, implies that it's not about a single charismatic leader of any stripe, of any political viewpoint, and so forth. And it's not about that. It's about the we, W-E, and how we nurture each other transformationally to grow a group to contribute to its shared vision. And Wohlstetter and her fellow researchers came up with a model. And I've given this to you, I think already, but let's reiterate it because I want you to see how this connects with what you all wrote about in the past week or two. First, by strength of the research, the strongest factor was power. Second strongest factor was knowledge, followed by information, followed by shared leadership. That's my term, not hers necessarily. Followed by smart goals, followed by adequate resources, and trailed by rewards. Wohlstetter is saying these factors and that order of strength must all be present within the district, within a group, lest the group is not able to contribute to each other. Let's refine that a little bit more closely. Now, power, what I'm going to do a separate slide for this. Power speaks to boundaries. That's really the key word here. Groups need to know what their advisory power is. There's a whole decision model, and I'd love to, maybe I'll get into it before this semester finishes. There's a whole, I think it's Yeton is one of the authors, Y-E-T-T-O-N, but there's another one I can't remember. Blake and Yeton. Mutan, I'm sorry. There's Yeton, there's Mutan, who identify decision-making processes in a school district. I am going to do this. I don't know when I'm going to do it, but I'm definitely going to do it. Maybe I'll do that on the 25th. Not to forget, our next meeting is on March 25th at 4:30. And essentially there's different modes of decision making. Sometimes you do a shared mode where everybody throws in, decides, and there are other times when the principal or the superintendent makes the command decision. And there are other times when there's all kinds of other ways to look at how decision-making can be made in partnership with stakeholders. A key issue and I totally agree with this by way of experience in my own research, is the boundaries. People get really turned off if they think that they are contributing to something and then they're being overlooked, ignored, or dismissed. almost always, I won't go into all my war stories about this. Almost always, it seems that when the rancor or the satisfaction of a group contributing to the whole with a W is when they think that they're being ignored when they thought they had the power to contribute. And so in the case of policy formulation, the board president, by way of advice from our superintendent, must reiterate right from the get-go that the board, in this case, is the lawmaking body in the district. And so if they're going to make a policy, they're going to take input from everybody they can take input from. But in the end, the boundary line is the board makes decision after the superintendent and um, our assistant superintendents and so forth contribute to make the final decision. That's a very important point. Then you go on from power to knowledge. Now, what's interesting about knowledge to me is there are two parts to this. Knowledge is in two parts. One is how, and the other one is what skills they have. And again, this is where confusion sometimes obstructs decision-making and policy formulation. The knowledge factor requires that people know how to collaborate. There was that word from the first slide again. If they don't know how to collaborate, and if the group just turns into, and we've all been in these groups, including myself, and I've even run groups where have fallen into this trap, where each person is much more interested in doing what I call I thinks. This is what I think. After all, I have a master's degree plus. I can talk about anything, the price of tea in China and so forth, when in fact, they don't know how to be smart together. And that requires that the superintendent, not the board president so much, the superintendent takes great pains to train whoever wants to contribute to know how to listen to each other. The key word, and I know I've used this earlier in the semester, is to be able to dialogue, to reflect. If you don't have that, you don't go very far at all. Think of the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. I don't know if you remember that story, but it's in Genesis someplace where they talk about mankind decides to build a tower to the heavens. And all of mankind is contributing in building this tower to the heavens. And the Lord, the different names for whoever decided this decides that tower is getting too close. And so what the Lord does, he shoots a lightning bolt down, and I'm not demeaning the story, trust me on this. And suddenly the people, everyone's speaking different languages, and they can't understand each other. They can't communicate. They can't collaborate, and the old tower comes tumbling down. And so that whole issue of communication, you can't collaborate without communication. They go together. There's no way, two ways about it. And so the superintendent's got to take great pains to teach people, or model for people, or practice with people to have the skills to hear each other. And I'm using that word hear as a verb, a metaphorical verb, to recognize what other folks are trying to say and respond to that. Key piece. The other thing is, and this is kind of obvious, but maybe not so obvious until I point it out. What kind of skills does the group have? Great example, and this is going on every day. If it has already started. I know we spoke about Amityville already has this past few days ago had to lay off, I think, 46 teachers because of a budget crisis that they've got. And people jump up and down and get very upset about that, understandably so. And when someone tries to explain how the budgeting process works, they kind of ignore it when in fact they may not have the skills or the content, if you want to use that word, to understand how a budget process has to come together. Again, this falls back to the superintendent and her charges to assure that everyone who wants to contribute can speak knowledgeably. And so these two pieces are critical to, you can see how they factor against or with the power premise as well. The third piece is information. And again, there's two pieces to this. One is, again, I'm deliberately doing it in my order as I recognize the strength, the issues associated with them, is input, and the other one is what I sometimes call the four-letter word, but it's not a four-letter word, or it's a four-letter word, but it's not, the word everyone needs to run away from. In fact, it's what they need in order to make the proper kinds of contributions to the policy formulation. And so here we're talking about, first of all, the input premise. And so if I can give you a quick war story on this, when I was a principal, not a district leader at that point, we were trying to figure out new ways to use homework properly. And we didn't do, looking back, I don't think we did the best job I thought that we could have done, but we worked hard on it. And we had come up with an idea called, that wasn't our idea, we had read about it, called the 10-minute rule. And so that basically it said that in elementary school, kindergarten should have 10 minutes worth of homework. First grade is 20 minutes and so forth. And so we thought it was a pretty good policy, and we supported that with all kinds of support for parents and for teachers. Didn't work nearly as well as I thought it should have worked. Part of the and we did communicate it out. We absolutely told the faculty members who weren't on the committee what we were thinking about putting in place, and we went to the PTA, and I put out newsletters and so forth to the community. And yet, when this began to kick in, we got people who were not happy about it. We pointed out to them that we communicated the changes we were thinking about, and we're looking for their points of view, and we welcome their points of view. And even with that, there were folks who were still pretty twisted about it because we didn't sometimes use the input that we were getting, especially from parents. And we had some trouble with that. So reason why I'm telling you that is because I overlooked it, in truth. And the other part of it is that how valuable it is to gain support for whatever it is that you are considering. And so if you've got a policy coming together about attendance, which I have to tell you, those of you who picked attendance, bless you, bless you, bless you, and good luck, because that's a tough one to examine. I'm smiling because I've been part of it, and I respect that you're going to try to do it. In fact, it's going to take a lot of communication back and forth among people to synthesize what you need to have happen in the end. And the other piece of that, and the only person I can remember about this, but I know you weren't the only one, was Michelle, who did some homework on the correlation between attendance and achievement. There are people who will dispute that, but believe it or not, I've seen some firsthand examples of how you could dispute it, quite frankly. But in the end, what we're talking about, you need to get your data in place. You need to know what the attendance rate is in your high school and your other buildings. You need to know it. You can't just think that you don't have it. You need to know why kids aren't coming to school. I did a consult a couple of years ago where the high school I was working with two other gentlemen, had a really poor, now don't forget it was COVID too. The high school had a pretty poor attendance rate, and there was many reasons for it, and it looked like it was just because kids didn't want to come to school, but they didn't want to come to school. I'm talking about the high school, but it wasn't just because they didn't want to come to school, so much as they didn't like going to school because the quality of instruction needed to be re-examined. And a lot of these kids in this particular school were working. Sometimes working 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then they get up and then come to school at 7 o'clock in the morning, where most high schools, by way of research, where they should not come to school that early. high school kids, uh, this simply said they weren't kind. And so the bottom line is the more data you have, qualitative and quantitative, the better the decision is that you can make. Another quick one I'll make, this will sound probably a bit political. Back after 9/11, President Bush at the time decided that we should invade Iraq. And the reason why we should invade Iraq because he thought, and many of his advisors, I suppose, thought that there were weapons of mass destruction pointed at us and our allies. And so he decided we were going to invade Iraq, get rid of Saddam Hussein, and remove the weapons. Well, yeah, we got rid of Hussein. That certainly was a victory, if you want, without any doubt. But the other part of it was there weren't any missiles. There weren't any weapons of mass destruction. Bad data could have led, or in my view, did lead to a faulty decision. The more data you have, the better off you're going to be to really take a look at what your policy is that you're going to consider. Now, these three pieces, before I go to the other ones, are the three strongest variables by strength. And they are, again, power, knowledge, and information. If they're faulty or in deficit, stop right there and go back and fix it. However, the other pieces have value too, and we'll go over them more quickly. Sometimes I mix up which goes first. I'm going to call this delegated leadership, which is a fancy word for shared leadership. I was in a committee the other day, higher education committee meeting, about how we want to look at how dissertations should be reworked, and there's a lot of moving parts to that conversation, and quite frankly, there were two, maybe three people, I being one of them, who was intimately involved with pulling some of this together. Although I was not the chair, I was contributing lots of thinking about it, especially that futures premise along the way. And it became very clear to me, and I was kind of surprised. These were all professors who more experience than I have in some respects, who didn't see what I said until I said it, which was there were so many moving parts and so many things we need to tackle that we couldn't tackle them all together en masse, for every piece. Not yet. We had to break it out. We had to distribute leadership. So the pieces would, and fancy, I mean, the common word would be we need to create subcommittees. And then the subcommittees would be able to report out after they do their homework and do their creativity to bring it back to rework it into a whole conversation with a W. And I waited, I made the point, I waited, and nobody volunteered for anything for about a minute. I just waited. So I've been there on that more than once. And one of the other professors said, well, I'll do X, Y, Z. And someone said, I'll do that with you. Next thing you know, people started to break out and take responsibility for things. And that's what that's about. Because the mini leaders you create, the more likely you are to get all the information, all the ideas brought out before everybody else. Very powerful tool. It's a key to transformational leadership. It's a key to transformational leadership. And then, again, I'm moving through these a little bit more quickly. There's something you all are familiar with. And, SMART goals. Why are we doing this thing? What's our task? What's our purpose? What are we charged with doing? And then what you do is you know that you'll break that into you make them specific, you make them measurable, you make them, I forget what it is, achievable, you make them realistic. I'm not spelling right, I know. And you identify the targets. enough said about that. The last two, well, the next one is resources. And essentially what you need, what the superintendent is responsible for, and the board by extension, is what do we need to make a proper policy? I'm only going to give you a couple of examples here. You're going to need information slash data. You're going to need experts. You're going to need time for discussion. That's a big one. And the skills to crunch that time and the data. Okay. And so it's not just, I need money. Send me $5 and I'll get this done. That's not the issue necessarily. It could be, depending on what the policy premise is about. And so you need to recognize what the resources are. By far and away, the weakest variable, unfortunately, or depends how you look at it, I suppose, would be this last one, and that would be rewards. All I'm going to do is say there are internal and external rewards that have to be built into something like this. Now, if this were a bit, by the way, Wohlstetter's model, it came out of business originally, that research, and then she moved it off into educational in nonprofit organizations when she studied some other premises associated with it. And she quickly realized that in business, there are external rewards. If you do a good job, get a raise. If you do a good job, you get a promotion and a raise. You get a vacation, you get some perks. Not true for nonprofits and not true for schools. You don't get a raise if you come up with a good idea. You might get a promotion down the line if that's part of it, but it's not nearly as strong nor as obvious. And for my money, no pun intended, I see the internal rewards as being far more satisfying to a group when they see a policy that has been properly co-constructed. Now, what you need to do, I'm not going to turn this in with the discussion question, although you may want to pull it into some of your other thinking, is that you've been on perhaps policy making groups. I know a couple of you went on board, so you know that you have been or will be. And you've all been part of different committees for different tasks. To what extent are these factors cleanly obvious? A couple of weeks ago, I asked you about your opinion about future. I was kind of surprised by that, to be honest, by your responses. Your opinion about future, and then your opinion about what your colleagues have about future. And now I'm turning around and saying to you, I'm not asking for your opinion about the value of these variables. This is a research-based model, but I am asking you about the extent to which they exist in your experiences by school district efforts. Answer that question. I'm not making it a discussion question, but answer that question for yourself, because that will inform you about how things need to be taken care of clearly as a superintendent. Now, really connected to that, I'm switching gears, okay? Totally switching gears. I'm going to give you a new title in the middle of this so you can see it. We're going back to that futures word, and now we're going back to cross-impact analysis. Okay. Now, I use that word two-dimensional on purpose. And I think I showed you how our futures wheel might work week or two ago. I don't remember if I did cross impact, and I can't get the PowerPoint to open. So I don't remember. So the short story is I thought it would be necessary to do this again. So I'm going to just do this quickly. And this device is deceptively simple, but it's great power for lots of things. By the way, as an instructor, if you're a teacher uh, of whatever you teach, using this actual analysis approach will yield tremendous results with students. You'll be amazed. But that's want to know more about that, contact me individually. I'll be happy to show you how. But in this case, we're talking about uh, a simple cross impact analysis. We use the word matrix sometimes, but it's not necessarily the word we use. I'm going to insert a table here. And we're going to keep it really simple. All right. So I'm going to take, I think it was Michelle, but there was a few people who took attendance as a policy premise. So I'm just brainstorming out here. Here are some ideas that may emerge from reformulating the attendance policy. You may want to put in a promotional requirement, which I don't think you can do legally, but let's put it in there for the moment. You may want to put in a pass-fail decision point. You may want to, I noticed, I think Michelle said this, or maybe it was Maxine. We talked about you may need to invest more resources into improving student attendance. Those are just three ideas straight off. These are all probable futures. They're possible, but they're also probable. They may even be preferable, he shouted, but we're not worried about preferable right now. So if I'm a superintendent, I'm sitting with my cabinet and I say, okay, here are the three ideas that seem to be emerging. And I wouldn't say these would be the only ideas. I'm just using these as a model. Let's do some more heavy duty two-dimensional thinking about it. So the question then becomes, who will be affected by this? Or who will be respond to that? How will the people react? So for example, how would students respond to this? How would the board respond to this? How would leadership respond to this? How would this affect achievement? Now you notice the last one is not people, it's an issue. I deliberately did that. That's why I stopped for a second, because this is not just, I'm not sure if I spelled achievement right. Because the last one is not a person, obviously, but it's an issue, it's a theme, it's a premise, it's a preferred future, for that matter. Now, I'm not going to do the whole chart for you. I'm just going to do one per level here. So what you do is, and remember the title of this was cross impact. So look at my fingers. So you have an idea, and now how will it impact as it intersects with the premise? So how will students respond to this? I'm making this up. They may not like it. They could be intimidated by it. Those are just two come to mind. The board, I'm not sure how the board would respond to that, so I'm going to skip that one. If you had a pass-fail thing, and a lot of districts try to get away with this, but it's a little tricky to say, well, if a kid's not in class for 20 days out of the quarter, the kid automatically fails. Be careful of those. All right, be careful of those, especially also, what are you talking about? Excused absences, illness absences, COVID? What are you talking about? It's much more complicated than that. So the board might want clarification. And if I was a board member, I would want clarification. There's so many clarifications and variations that the policy becomes useless. Now, how about investing more resources? None of you are old enough to remember the person I'm going to mention. There used to be a comedy series that been rightfully taken off the air because it was had tinges of 1930s racism to it, where Miss Crabtree was running a one school, one class, one schoolhouse. Everybody, all the kids were in one KA sat in one school, in one classroom, and if a kid decided to play hooky, the attendance officer would go to find the kid fishing or hiding off on the street someplace. And so that attendance officer was charged with getting kids to come back into school. And there was a whole several silly stories about what they did to the attendance officer. Maybe we need more attendance officers. Well, then we know that that is a money issue. And I think the board would probably respond to that. And I'm just popping some other right. But you can, what you would do is, if I want to get my arms around the whole elephant, I want to be sure that I use a process like this to my word, two words I'll use: measure / evaluate the responses I'm going to get. And I will give you your tuition money back. As you begin to do something like this, you begin to realize that first of all, there are more than one future in each box. I mean, there's many futures in here. That's one premise. The other premise is you'll begin to see the slant, the culture of the thinking as it emerges, and then have to make decisions about how that filters for a proper attendance policy or any policy you're taking a look at. Just use that as the example. Okay, so now if we were to go all the way back to the beginning, I took you through a couple of different premises here. So let's just remind you. All right. I explained the difference between collaboration and cooperation as a matter of degree, where collaboration is much more preferable and relies on communication to bring it together. I showed you the Wohlstetter model of high involvement with its 7 variables and the strength of their variables. And then I talked about power as the need for defined boundaries, how knowledge has 2 components, how to kumbaya, how to work with each other, and as well as how to bring the skills of analysis, of inquiry, of data dissection, and so forth into play to properly. I spelled that wrong, didn't I? Knowledge. We talked about information having 2 components, the need to seek continuous input. That is to say, you share out, you communicate, and then you communicate back, and you keep communicating. So nobody's left in the lurch, at least not from your point of view. And the other piece is you need data, qualitative and quantitative data, lots of it. The more data you have, the better the policy is going to look like. As the policy idea begins to grow legs and horns and extra feet, what you need to do is to delegate leadership out so different people can take responsibility according to their expertise or interest levels or both to contribute to the completion of a sound policy recommendation. And then we went, SMART goals. They had to be specific, measurable, and achievable. You had to have the resources to assure yourself that the policy could in fact be put into place and sustained. And you need to hope to build reward system in there, although that's a kind of a murky one for us. And then if you really want to do this right, you bring in tools of futures forecasting and analysis. The one I'm demonstrating today is cross-impact analysis. And the whole idea was to give you a quick model. This isn't by no means an exhaustive thing. You could put as many ideas as you want down this left-hand column. You could put as many people, places, and things across the, is that the x-axis? All the way across. I just use 4 very obvious ones. Here's a point too, and then I'll stop yapping. Which of these is most important? to the group? The students' response, the board's response, leadership's response, or the issue of achievement? Giving you one of my smug looks there and saying, hey, folks, it's the last one. In the end, everything is about achievement, I think. Okie doke. So we're going to move on. I'm going to save the PowerPoint, but I'm not going to post it. You have it here in this video, and I will post this video in a little while. What do you mean? I can't save it. File, save as. You can get off. I'm just trying to figure out how to get out. Oh, I got to stop sharing. I always forget to do that. Okay.